Hi, welcome to Camp Happy Mail. I'm so glad that you decided to come back and join me for another adventure in card making. Today, we're going to do the baby wipe technique. You will need some baby wipes. You can use explosion powders, and you can use re-inkers for your ink pads. Those are Stampin' Up! Re-inkers. You will also need a spray bottle and some paper. That's just Nina 80-pound cardstock. And then you'll need something to use to put your homemade ink pad in. That's basically what we're doing, is we're going to create a homemade ink pad. You'll see I have ink on my fingers, and that's because I didn't think about wearing gloves, and when I did try to wear gloves, it just hindered what I was trying to do. So I do have ink on my fingers, and you'll notice that as I'm pulling these out and laying out my baby wipes that I am getting some ink on those baby wipes from my fingers, and it's fine. That's not going to show up on the project that we're creating. So basically what you want to do is you want to take a couple of baby wipes. I think I pull out 3 or 4 here, and you want to lay them down on a mat. Now you want to work on a surface that is like a craft mat of some kind, because you are dealing with inks and you don't want those to stain your desktop. So you take your baby wipes and you fold them up and you make just a small square out of them. And then you take your re-inkers and you start to put just a couple of drops of each of the colors that you're using. Now this is Balmy Blue, and I will also be using Magenta Madness and Bumblebee. Bumblebee is a yellow color. So you just randomly put these on your baby wipe, and there isn't a rhyme or reason to where you put them. Because they're going to get all mixed together. So you want to make sure that you pick colors that do blend well together, that won't ultimately create mud for you. So if you're not real familiar with what colors go together, I suggest you get a color wheel, because that will help you to pick colors. So these ones, my pink and my yellow together would make orange. My blue and my yellow would make green. My red and my pink and my blue together would make purple. So ultimately all these colors do go well together. So the normal way that this technique goes is that you could use this ink pad, or use that homemade ink pad as a way to, you could press stamps into it and then stamp those onto paper. But I'm going to try something different. I'm actually going to take that homemade ink pad with those 3 beautiful colors on it, and I'm going to stamp them through a stencil. I'm hoping to get the pattern of the stencil to come out on my paper, and it's another way of making a pattern paper, if you will. So I'm just squishing this around, and you'll see that my colors are getting mixed together, but they're not making mud. They're not making brown or black or anything like that. And it's very, very random. And that's why you want to put your ink just randomly all over your homemade ink pad, your baby wipes. So I'm just going to continue to press these around and make sure that I get all the little design of the stencil covered. And then we'll do a reveal here in a second. And there we have it. Okay, so that's our first one. I really like how this came out. I think it's very pretty with those colors. Those are probably 3 of my favorite Stampin' Up! Colors. So I'm going to set that aside to dry. And I'm going to spray down my stencil with the water. And I was going to just wipe it off and clean it. And then I thought, well, maybe I can pull a print from this because it had quite a bit of ink on it. So that's what I'm going to do. So I sprayed it down with water, a generous amount of water. And now I'm just pressing another piece of cardstock down onto the top of that stencil to try to pull off a print. And that's not too bad. So I'm going to take it back down. There are some spaces that didn't transfer very well. So I'm just going to keep pressing this down until I get it covered as much as I want to. Ultimately, I would like to be able to use all of the pieces that I create with this stencil to make a card, which I'll show you at the end. So it's entirely up to you how often you go back down and press this onto your stencil. Totally up to you. So, okay, so I'm going to stop there and we're going to let that one dry. And I'm going to take this and we're going to make another one. So I just put the stencil back down on top of the paper and I take my ink pad, or my baby wipe pad, And I'm debating now if I need to add some more colors to this or what I need to do with it. So I'm checking out all the options here. And I decided I need to put a little bit more ink on this. So I'm refreshing the Balmy Blue. And it looks like I'm going to refresh all of the other colors too, which is probably not a bad idea. Although the baby wipes are pretty juicy, it does take a lot out of them to press them down through the stencil. So it doesn't hurt to re-ink it. And I just put my ink back in the same places that it was, just to keep it a little bit clean. Okay, so apparently I've decided to add some water to this to help the baby wipes a little bit, because the baby wipes are a little bit drier now because I did use them once. So again, like the first time, I'm just going to press this down. And your fingers are going to get really inky while you're doing this if you decide not to wear the gloves. My fingers were pretty stained after I did this. I used Blue Dawn to wash my hands after I used these inks. It gets most of them off. I did have a slight blue tinge to my fingers after I was done, but I'm perfectly good with that. I mean, anybody that knows me knows that I do this kind of stuff, and they're pretty used to seeing my hands have ink on them. They just know it's a sign of, a good time was had. So we're going to continue pressing this down until I feel like it's completely covered. And then this will be our second full panel background. And it looks like this one is turning out to be more magenta than anything. And that's fine. I'm not sure how this is going to come out. I mean, every panel that you do is going to be different. And I kind of like that about this technique, because you never know what you're going to get. And I find it as a fun challenge to figure out how to use these kind of things. So that one is pretty. Okay, so here's what we ended up with. I have two panels that are dark, and then I have the one that was lighter. And now I'm going to come up with a card to make for this. And the card that I'm actually making for this was for a challenge that was hosted by a friend of mine. Her name is Julia. She has a channel here on YouTube. She's Senior Susie Stamps. And a couple of months ago, she held a challenge where she wanted all the participants to do the baby wipe technique and create a card using what they had created. So that's why I did this technique. This was my first time doing this technique. I'd never done this before. And I thought it looked like great fun after watching one of her videos and then doing some other research on it. So basically, I'm just going to figure out which of these nested dies I want to use. This is a die set by Hero Arts. And there are quite a number of dies there. And I'm just figuring out which one I want to use to cut out my panel from. I had an idea in mind for this. And so this is what we're going to do. So basically my idea is that I wanted to cut a centerpiece out of this panel because I want to be able to mat that. So I picked out my dies so that I had two nesting sizes, one smaller and then an outer one. The smaller one is going to be the piece that I cut out of the background. And then the one that's the next size up will be a piece that is, I believe, matted in black or cut in black to be matted. So I taped the die down onto my piece because my piece was a little bit warped from the wetness of the baby wipe, and just to hold that die in place because I needed it to be in a specific place. So I ran that through the Big Shot, and now we're just going to carefully peel off the tape off of this because I don't want to rip the panel. Sometimes the mint tape can be a little tricky to get off. I've never had it actually tear a piece, but I'm also very, very careful when I peel it off because with a piece like this, this is a one of a kind, and I don't want to have to remake another one. So now, because I cut a hole in that panel, it loses some of its integrity as far as like structurally. So now I'm going to cut a piece of white cardstock out that is the same exact size as that panel that I cut out of the pattern paper. And the reason for that is because I'm going to replace that panel that I cut out of the pattern paper with that white piece. And that's so that whenever I put this card together, that anything that I put over top of that doesn't sink down into that piece that's been cut out. And I'll show you that coming up. So now I'm going to take that next die that was the next size up, and I'm going to cut my piece of black. And this is going to be what that smaller piece that was cut out of the center is put into, or is matted onto. Now that I've cut that black mat, I'm just measuring it out to make sure that everything is going to line up okay, and then I'm going to set these aside. And because I had a bunch of extra pieces left over and I knew I wasn't going to need this many for my initial design, I decided to change up my design, and I'm going to do a double mat situation on this. And you'll see what I mean by when I go to put these together. So basically I'm die cutting out one more white rectangle and another of the pattern paper rectangles, and these will be mounted on top of the other ones that I just previously cut. So the next step of this card is that I'm going to take these flower dies. These are from a couple of different companies. I think we've got some Stampin' Up, some My Favorite Things, and I don't remember who the last one is off the top of my head, but I'll link below what I have or what I can find. But anyways, I'm going to take these and I'm going to, out of the remaining panels, I'm going to die cut a bunch of flowers to use on this card. So I am going to speed this up a little bit, and then we'll come back to the assembly of this card. While die cutting the pieces out of the pattern paper, I decided that I wanted to have centers of some of these and some of the flowers and leaves also be a gold color. So I pulled out some gold metallic cardstock and cut out some pieces of those as well. The gold metallic paper just adds a really nice touch to any of the flowers that you cut out. Now that we have all of our pieces die cut, we're going to go ahead and start to assemble this card. First, I'm going to take that initial panel that we cut out. Remember the one that we took the centerpiece out of it? And then we cut the white cardstock, and I said we were going to fill the inside of that frame with that one. That's what I'm doing here now. So that is the white piece that I cut, and I'm just taping it to the inside of that panel. And then I'm going to turn this over, and I'm going to glue this to our card base. You'll see when I turn this over that it's going to have just the frame and that white piece, but we're going to cover this up. Nobody will ever know that you took a centerpiece out of this. I don't remember who I picked this tip up from for doing this, but I've found it to be very helpful, especially if you don't have a lot of a certain kind of paper, or if you're using an expensive paper like a metallic paper. You can easily do this technique. Now that we have the first layer on the card base, we're going to work on the first set of matted pieces. This was the piece that I cut out of the center of that back frame, and I'm just matting this on a piece of black, and then those will get put down over top of that white piece. See, I told you we were going to cover that so you wouldn't see it. I really love that little trick of being able to cut a piece out of a panel and then hide it like that so that you can extend the use of your paper. It's probably one of my favorite tricks to do. So anyways, so now we're going to take, and this is what I was talking about doing the double matting. Because I had a lighter panel, I thought it would be fun to use part of that to do a second layer of matting on top of the first layer that I have there, just to break it up a little bit and to make this space where I was going to put the sentiment a little bit smaller. I knew what sentiment I wanted to use on this, and I knew it wasn't going to take up a big white panel had I just mounted it on that first panel that's back there on the black. So I went ahead and I cut a smaller one out of the lighter colored pattern paper and then put the white square on top of it. And now we're going to start to add some flowers, and I'm just sorting out the flowers here so I can see what I have, and then we'll start to glue these down. The stamp set that I've chosen to pick the sentiment from is a set that's a collaboration between Hero Arts and Pink Fresh Studio. It's called You Make a Difference. I'm not sure if this is still available, but I'll look for it, and if I can find it, I'll link it below. It has a great flower border image that actually takes up the whole front side of an A2 size card. But today we're just going to use the one sentiment. And the sentiment says, will it be easy? Nope. Will it be worth it? Absolutely. I love this sentiment, and I've used this on all kinds of encouragement cards. So I put that down in the MISTI, and I'm going to put my piece back in place so that I can stamp this in the center. The ink that I'm going to use on this is just basic Memento Tuxedo black ink. It's a permanent ink, and it always gives me a really nice black stamped image. I don't have to do anything extra to it. I don't have to heat emboss it. You can heat emboss this. You got to be really quick if you do that. But it's always just given me a really, really nice black stamped sentiments, so that's why I like it. So now I'm going to lay that panel down on my card base and start to lay out the flowers on this. I didn't glue that panel down yet. I was just kind of seeing where the flowers were going to lay on this and trying to figure out how I wanted it to be laid out. I will take this panel and take it off of the card base here in a second and then continue to lay out those flowers. I was just basically trying to figure out a layout and figure out which corners I wanted the flowers to go into and how I wanted it to look overall. Now that I know basically that I want these in opposite corners, I'm going to go ahead and start to glue these down. So I am going to speed this up to make it go a little bit faster because this is a lot of pieces to glue down. Now I will tell you that I do love this kind of card making. I once made 48 cards using one of these sets, and it was just a bunch of die cutting and then just arranging the pieces on the fronts of the cards, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I love paper piecing like this. I think is a lot of fun, and it's especially fun when you have pretty papers to work with, and I think the metallics really just do a lot to set off the colors in this. So we'll go ahead and finish gluing all these down, and then we'll finish the assembly of this card. Now that all the flowers are attached, I'm going to go ahead and clean up the desktop a little bit so that we have some space to work. I'm going to adhere that panel with the flowers on it to the front of the card. The initial die cut, as you can see, has some holes around it. It's a decorative border, and so I have to try to get some of the glue in and around all of those holes. And then I'll put glue on the rest of the back of this, and we will put it down on top of the main background piece. This is the last step to this card. I just need to make sure that this piece is adhered down really well because I don't want it to come apart. There are a lot of layers to this, and this one will end up going in the mail. So I'm just making sure that to get this pressed down all good. And that's basically our card. So the very last thing that we're going to do is I want to add my custom stamp onto the back. I get my custom stamps made by a company named Magenta. I will put a link to them in my description below. They have all kinds of designs that you can choose from if you don't feel like creating your own, or if you do have a design of your own, you can upload it and they'll create it for you. It is not necessary to have a custom stamp made that you can use on the back of your cards. I personally like them. I think it gives it just a little extra special touch. So I have several that I've purchased from Magenta. And that finishes our card for the day. I hope you'll give the baby wipe technique a try, and thank you for joining me. We'll see you in the next video.